We are live.
We are live. Welcome to Perspective Shift.
We're actually really not live. We're recording this.
Hey, it doesn't have the same flow to it.
I know. When I push the button, I'm like, we are live.
I love it.
Yeah.
So we got a great episode for you guys today. It is Halloween, October 31st, 2022.
Yeah, why didn't we dress up today? We should have thought
We should
about
have
that.
we should have absolutely dressed up for this episode. I know, right? We need to.
Actually, we are dressed up. I'm Mike Kitlas.
and I'm Frank Daly. Thank you for joining us on Perspective Shift. We are your hosts.
We're switching for the day.
But yeah, Halloween's always an exciting time. It's a fun, how should I say it? I guess you can call it a holiday, here. But still, there's a lot of life. There's a lot of good story behind Halloween, too, as far as, between the world of the living and the dead is the thinnest on Hallows Eve. Yeah. So there's some cool stuff that relates to Halloween. But Frank and I are spending our Halloween morning going to talk to you guys all about a gentleman named Mr. Michael Singer.
Yeah.
And we're excited to talk about Michael today. I love Michael Singer's work, and so it's cool that we get to dive into him today. Where should we start, Frank?
Well, let's just start let's give a little background of him. I think he was born in 1940. Is it 7?
I wrote it down. Yep, 1947.
He's from Florida.
Yep.
He was at a young age. He started getting into the meditation and surrender. Like, he had this moment where he realized it was close to like Eckhart Tolle too, in the way they explain it, where he realized there was a voice inside of his head, but he wasn't that in which he was hearing. He was observing it. And then he went on this journey, and I think it was like around 1975, he bought a plot of land right outside of Gainesville, Florida, and started the Temple of the Universe.
Yep.
And he still runs it today. Every Sunday, I believe he has, I know he does, because I heard him talk about it.
Yep.
Where he has a meditation, or they come to the temple, if you will. And and then obviously he wrote 2 books.
Yes.
One is The Untethered Soul, which I had read. Wow, it's probably, I probably read that book about 15 years ago.
Okay.
And I remember when I first read it, I was at a house party. I didn't know these people. I was firstly introduced. I went to a house party, and I started talking to the guy who owned the house. We started getting a conversation. He's like, come into my library. And you go into the library, and he's pulling out all these books. And he goes, have you ever read this one? It was The Untethered Soul. I said, I did not. And he actually gave me the copy of it.
Nice.
Yeah, and what a great book. So,
That's cool.
and then and that came out in 2007, I believe.
Yep.
And then the other one was the Surrender Experiment. I read that, and that's just it's kind of like, I don't want to say his autobiography, but it was him going through life, just everyday stuff, and then learning to surrender to it regardless of the outcome. It wasn't that he wasn't responsive to the world. Mm-hmm. He ended up running a multi-billion-dollar company. He sold it for, I think, $3 to $5 billion. I forgot the number.
Well,
but
that's a cool thing about Michael Singer that I wanted to talk about with everybody in the audience is a lot of these different, yogis or, spiritual teachers and gurus, etc. They're not seen often with a business sense, and we like try to separate that, and we're like, oh yeah, this is more a spiritual path, and that's like a business path, etc. There is no that classification that I'm referencing. That's all mind. That none of that. There's no, oh, you're a spiritual person. Oh, you're a business person. Oh, you're this or you're that. That's all mind. And I think Michael Singer is a great example of that, because he did, create this company, sell this company for billions with a B, billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Both of his books that Frank just referenced, The Untethered Soul as well as The Surrender Experiment, those are New York Times bestsellers. This gentleman was on Oprah. He, the very large presence. This is a big, as far as society would see it, he made a big splash. And not a lot or not many of the spiritual teachers or, gurus and these people that we talk about have made it to a certain level of notoriety that Michael Singer has.
Well, Michael, he'll talk about this too. It's because he got on Oprah. He never sought out, like he rarely leaves Gainesville. He really lives at Temple of the Universe. So he doesn't travel around. He does very few interviews. He doesn't do a lot. Actually, because I was looking out there.
He doesn't have a lot of content.
No, he doesn't. So he's just living his life in that he's dealing with what's in front of him, and that's actually what he teaches, and he actually practices it every day. And when you start to listen, like when I read the book 15 years ago, I was like, this is very interesting. Intellectually, it was great, but I wasn't really practicing it, or I would practice it momentarily, where it's pretty much you're separating yourself about that noise, and that those thoughts coming into your mind aren't yours. They're somewhere else, and you don't have to respond to them. And the way I look at it, like the way he explains it, is if you just let those thoughts in the mind pass you by, it's like watching a 3-year-old kick and scream. If you just sit there and observe and don't respond to it, eventually the 3-year-old stop and try a different way of dealing with life. So we actually don't pay attention to our mind. The mind starts to quiet. And it's a very simple practice. Like I do so many other practices that are seemingly more convoluted. And what I mean it's simple is I could literally be driving in my car and I feel something come up. And I don't need to close my eyes. I don't need to put any particular music on. I just witness it. I'm like, all right, let's witness like I'm watching a movie. But I'm not letting the movie pull me in with the unwanted feelings. Mm-hmm. And then I just watch it. And all of a sudden, you can almost feel something pop when you do that. And the energy starts to flow again, the thoughts. And the more you do this, the less of what we consider to be the disturbances of negative thoughts. And sometimes I don't even attach to positive thoughts because I attach to the moment what's in front of me. My reality is if I'm driving a car, that's my reality. I can't be thinking about when I get to work, when I get here, because if I do, I get disturbed. Even if it's something good, like, we all know this, like kids that are getting ready to go to Disneyland, and it's like, the day before, they're so disturbed they can't sleep because they're out of their minds. It's excitement. But
same thing before Christmas.
Yeah, and then they
same
wake
thing
up,
before Halloween.
Yeah, and they wake up cranky.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, so if you just let that go on, and obviously when the time comes when you actually show up in the next moment, you'll be present in that moment. You won't be looking for the next moment. And that is the human, that's the condition that all humans have, and this is what creates all disease. We don't realize as we start to slow down our brain brain patterns by thinking less, the moment becomes a beautiful place, regardless if it's raining, sunny, your car has a flat tire, it doesn't matter. Actually, one of the things that really struck me when I read the Surrender Experiment was you find out that when he wrote The Untethered Soul, his company was being, it was under investigation by the FBI.
I'm glad you bring this up. Frank and I were talking about this off air before we started, and I thought this was a great topic. So chat a little more about that.
So can you imagine running a big company? I forgot 100 and something employees. It's a software company. It's mainly, from what I understand, he wrote
like an algorithm or something?
Yeah, well, a program for medical billing.
Okay.
All right, so it's in that field. So he wrote it himself. I think I heard him tell the story, like when he was younger, he went into a Radio Shack and there was a personal computer there, so he bought it. And he's like, oh, this looks cool. And so he took it home and started messing around with it. And there was no real books on coding, so he pretty much figured out how to code. And over time, he developed the software.
Okay.
So now this company's huge. He's building more buildings right on that land that he purchased. So he keeps building. And
I heard he adds onto it. Yeah.
He keeps adding onto it, and the money would show up when it needed to. So he was very highly functional, very businesslike, but he was doing it not from the go-getter, like I got to do this, I got to do that. He didn't have goals. It just happened that he ended up running a multi-billion-dollar company, and he accepted that. He didn't push away. This is not who I am. I'm a spiritual person. I'm supposed to be meditating and staring at a leaf or whatever. Mm-hmm. No, he doesn't do that. Matter of fact, running his business at that higher level was his spiritual practice. Everything we do is a spiritual practice.
And he talks about that. He talks about, hey, the separation between that two. And I think that's important because a lot of people We think you're either this or that. I'm either a business person and I'm locked into this third dimension and I can't have any spiritual sense, etc. I just got to make money, and that's not the case. And Michael Singer is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, I believe if you think that way, what happens is we always separate things. When I'm doing this, so spirituality for a lot of people is just Sunday, going to church. But if you don't take it, if you're not, you're a spiritual being having, like they say, a human experience. So if you take that spirituality with you everywhere you go, those human experiences will be delightful. But if you wait till Sunday to have the experience, like this is where and that's why people can't wait for Sunday a lot of times, because they're so exhausted by Saturday that, because they didn't practice letting go and surrendering. Mm-hmm. And, and as he talks about in the surrender experiment, which is very interesting, is during the time when his company was being investigated for embezzlement or, and I think it turns out it was one of his employees who did it. And then when he got caught, he actually he said it was Michael.
Okay. And so he blamed it on Michael Singer.
Yeah. And the investigation went on for 6 years. So it wasn't like, it wasn't, I don't think they ever went to court, but he said it went on for 6 years. So it was in his preview, in his peripheral for 6 years.
That's a lot.
But know this, in that period, that's when he actually wrote The Untethered Soul.
See, that's cool.
So he was already practicing this this way of living. And when he's asked, I heard Oprah ask him this, Tony Robbins even asked him when they interviewed with him. And he goes, weren't you like pissed? He goes, nope. He goes, I was just watching it like I was watching a movie. And it took so what he's pretty much saying is it's not that bad things, what we consider to be bad things or disturbances aren't going to happen. You just don't get pulled down by them. Mm-hmm. And when you start practicing these principles, and they are basic and simple, they really are. It's just where I'm right here. Me and Mike are on this podcast right now talking into mics, and we have a camera, so we don't even know who's watching. But if I start thinking like, I got to end the show early because I got to meet with somebody at 12 o'clock. All of a sudden, I'm not present. And it changes the way I feel. It short circuits my feeling. And all of a sudden, now I'm speeding up and mispronouncing things. And
That's it. The mind, we trip over the mind.
Yeah, we do. Now, the mind is a brilliant instrument. He'll talk about this too. Like the mind understands and learned a language, understands the things around us, money, whatever. I don't have to keep relearning that every day. What the mind is when it gets poor is when it's taking over. So it's like, say your mind is an employee and you're the master, you're the owner of the business, and you keep listening to the employee to tell them what to do, that's when things go wrong. But when you train the mind to be like, no, you're the employer, this is your job, do it well. We'll interact, but do it well. And when you do that, the employee goes off and is silent and does their work. And then the business owner knows how to conduct their business. So there's a part of us that is the master, and the mind is just the servant. And if we learn to contain that, it gets quiet on its own. It really, we don't have to, it's not about just shutting it out. It literally quiets down. And I notice my thoughts quiet down. And when thoughts do pop up, I just step back, let them run through. And I can tell when they pop up. It's not that noise in my head. I can feel it in my body. I feel like a weird disturbance. It's almost like if you're running water through a faucet and all of a sudden, or a hose, and all of a sudden the water stops coming out. It's like, okay, what's going on? Oh, there's a kink in the hose. That's what it is. And so that disturbing thought is a kink. So how do I release it? Just step back, look at it, straighten the hose out, boom, and then the water starts flowing. It feels good again. But I don't sit there and think, how did that kink get in the hose? I'm like, it doesn't matter how the kink got in.
That's where we get caught up in life. We do go, why is this hose kinked? Who kinked this? They kinked this on purpose. You see what I'm saying, guys? Yeah. In general life, that's where the mind goes. We start to, people wanted to do this to me, or of course this happened. Of course my hose gets kinked. My whole life this has happened to me. It's that inner self-talk that keeps us stuck. It wasn't Michael Singer, but I once heard somebody talking about how we are hosts. That we are hosts, and these thoughts that come through, they're not our thoughts. And because we are this host and we can experience and feel a thought, and think more about it or less about it, that we begin to identify with it. And so when you can see yourself more as a host of multitudes of thoughts, you no longer have to become so attached to an individual thought. Like, crazy thoughts come up all the time. I don't know about you guys, but like, I'll be driving down the road sometimes. I'm like, like, you ever get to like the side of a cliff or something and you're like, what if I just fell off? But you think about weird stuff in your head.
Remind me not to drive in a car with you.
No, dude. You know what I mean.
No,
You so know what I mean. That was awesome. Yeah. Like, I'm not riding with you.
Yeah.
But we have these weird thoughts that come up in our heads, like, or at least I do.
Yeah.
My whole life, where I'm just like, oh, that was weird. But imagine if I attached to that. Oh
yeah.
My God,
I definitely wouldn't drive in the car with you.
But I mean, we think about thoughts that you've had. I'm sure everybody has had these thoughts where you're like, whoa, that is so weird. And it has a number of things to do with that, like how, where you're at, where you're located, who you're surrounded with. We're picking up on all these energy and frequencies, that we can't see with the naked eye, but we can feel them, and we choose what we host, and we do not choose, or we do not need to identify with the thoughts and become the thoughts. And that's really what's at the crux of everything Michael Singer is teaching, which is, hey, look, your mind is an awesome, I think he calls it like an appliance. He's like,
It's an appliance.
he does. He's like, he refers to it as an appliance.
Mine's a toaster.
But it's true. When you can look at the mind not as you, which we've done our whole lives, and look at it as the tool, the instrument that you get to, pick and choose from, that you have control over, that's when the separation occurs, and you can step away from these negative mind patterns, negative thought patterns that you felt your whole life, and go, wait a second, I've thought A, B, and C my whole life, hasn't gotten me anywhere. What if I give up A, B, and C?
Yeah.
What if I try D, E, and F now?
Yeah.
We have that ability.
Yeah, and actually, when you start off the conversation with somebody said this about the thoughts.
Yeah.
Actually, Michael Singer talks about this, and
Does he?
Yeah, he'll talk about, like, so you look at human civilization. So just different different anthropologists will tell you from history, like, okay, civilization's been around 30,000 years, maybe 60,000 years. It's changed. It doesn't matter. So the thoughts that are running through our head are a culmination of 60,000 years of human history. And the reason we do have, like, thoughts of, I'm driving near a cliff, is because you watched a movie where someone drove off a cliff.
Yeah.
So they really aren't our thoughts. They're implied or pushed in. So we have all these possibilities. Just like when I turn on the radio, I've right now, if I go to, like, say a Spotify, by the way, Perspective Shifts on Spotify.
Quick plug.
But if I go to Spotify, any song that's ever been recorded is already playing on there, but I can only get the one. So it's now we're choosing. But can you imagine Spotify's system malfunctioned, and I'm driving in my car or listening to, and all of a sudden every song just came on at once, or parts of the songs kept coming in? How aggravating would that be?
Mm-hmm. Or you were forced to listen to a song you didn't want to.
Yeah, exactly. You get attached to it, and it's just constant. So next thing you know, you're not getting the rhythm of the music in which you're trying to get into. It's taking over. But yet, that's not how it works. Mm-hmm. And so
Great analogy of
the
the
mind is like that, but when we allow it to go amok, or we listen to it too long, it will keep, oh my God, Frank's higher mind is listening to me. So let me speak more. Let me say more. Let me say more. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, Frank needs to go to bed. And when you just observe it, you look at it, and like all of a sudden you watch it get really quiet. When you watch a 3-year-old kick and scream, if you just sit there in your chair and hold your ground, nothing's going to happen to a 3-year-old in 5 minutes. Trust me. And all of a sudden, they stop crying because you're not responding. And to them, the organism of who they are, realize, okay, this isn't working. And you get quiet. And all of a sudden, they get quiet. Then I go over and address the situation. What is it? Oh, I'm hungry. Okay, here you go. And all of a sudden, you're training the 3-year-old not to kick and scream, but to say, I'm hungry. Okay, we can deal with this, and that's how we slow down the thinking mind. And his, Michael Singer writes about this brilliantly in Untethered Soul, and obviously he experiences it in the Surrender Experiment. It's kind of like, I know he doesn't like to call it his autobiography, but it is his life's journey through that period of time from like 1975. And
speaking of his life journey, one cool little tidbit that when we were chatting earlier today that we touched on, but I've seen a couple interviews with Michael where, and there's a great interview, by the way, guys. I don't know if anybody out there listens or watches that show, The Big Bang Theory. Big Bang Theory is super funny. It's an awesome television show. But Sheldon, the main scientist dude, his girlfriend interviews him, not as that character, but she has a podcast.
It's not on Big Bang.
And she interviews Michael Singer because she read his book, Untethered Soul, and it was a huge awakening moment for her. So she invited him on to speak on her personal podcast, which has a ton of listeners and viewers. But on that podcast, as well as others, she asks him about his past. And he very, very rarely talks about his past. And I thought that was very, very telling, in multiple interviews. And it's because your past is a series of narratives. And it's the stories in which you want to carry with yourself. As soon as something happens and it's over, it's over. Never again, or is that energy going to align the exact same way and it's going to happen like it did? And so him not going and dredging up this past or having to talk about his past is a very big statement for those watching. And it's because a lot of us at home feel like we need to bring our past with us everywhere. We need to bring our past into a relationship. I'm so worried about dating because as soon as we start dating, I got to explain my litany of problems to this new partner, and they're going to judge me. And no, you don't. You really don't need to do that.
Yeah, and one of the reasons he doesn't talk about his past prior to getting into what we call the Temple of the Universe, where he now resides and runs it, is because he doesn't want people to relate to, oh, this is why he's spiritual.
Yep.
He was beaten as a child. And I'm just throwing this out there. It's not what happened to him. So when people tell this story, everyone's relating to that part of it. It's like, well, that hasn't happened to me, so therefore spirituality can't come upon me. I'm like,
all mine.
No. It could be you stubbed your toe. I know a lot of people became spiritual, had brilliant upbringings, and some had horrible upbringings. But it had nothing to do with the upbringing. It had to do one day they were just tired to listen to their mind. Yeah. And that's why he doesn't go back in the past, because it's not relatable. You don't need to know about that. Just stick forward.
It's not important. Yeah. In fact, to give it any importance would be the mind.
Exactly. People still get hung up on that, so they want to know the history and the biography of this person.
Well, it's not that we get hung up on. We're fucking trained that way.
Yeah.
We're like you. My favorite example, when you told me about what happened, growing up, when you came home from school, you'd sit at your dinner table and your parents would say, "How was your day?" "Oh, great."
Yeah.
Why? We have been trained our whole lives to explain why or how and categorize it, and identify it. And true freedom is letting go of all that.
Yeah.
And understanding that you can just be in this moment, experiencing this now with no, how did this happen? What's next? What's to come? Dissecting and taking apart every given situation. Is this person enjoying themselves? Am I enjoying myself? Would I rather be somewhere? All these little different things. This is why we're so exhausted. This is why we're tired. This is why we're burnt out. We're so swallowed by the mind. We're like all literally drowning in our thoughts at all times, and we don't understand that we can come up and take a breath of fresh air, and we don't have to have any mind. In fact, the mind is a servant. The mind is our servant. It is our appliance. It is our tool. And as soon as we start to look at the mind and thoughts like that, then we no longer associate or identify with them. Oh, I'm in a bad mood today because I had A, B, and C thoughts. Oh, because I thought about my mom passing, and my bills are due, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna have enough money to go out to the bar this weekend. Whatever. You've created a story, and now you won't allow yourself to enjoy a moment because of thoughts.
Yeah.
And as soon as we can get out of this funk of the mind controlling how we experience, that's the key.
Yeah. And this is too, we're not saying here, and Michael Singler certainly does not say this, like if you do lose a loved one, sit with it.
Of course.
Yeah, you're gonna experience sadness. It's not about getting to a point where like, oh well, let's go get a cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. But it's not allowing the mind to take over. It's actually sitting there in the field of what we call sadness. If you just sit with it, it will teach you something. But the mind isn't taking over. You're just witnessing it. You're feeling the missing of them. But you're not thinking about it. It's a difference. Because you don't want to have to overcome something. Like, I'm strong because I overcame this. I'm like, okay, now that you're strong, if you had to overcome something to get to the next level, how are you going to overcome this? You have to have something bad happen to you to overcome it again? But that's not how life is ought to live. Because then you're going to purposely put obstacles in your way just to get hurt so it can heal. I'm like, no. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Things will happen. But I don't want to be part of placing them in there. I just want to respond to them in the moment in which I'm in and not do it through, oh my God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? I'm like, whatever happens, happens.
Yeah.
One thing we all know is I haven't met a human being that came to realization that they're not going to pass away. They may argumentatively like, I'm going to live to 200. I'm like, all right, go for it, Mm-hmm. Who am I here to say that can't be done? But that's what keeps me alive. That's what keeps me in the moment, understanding that everything is fleeting in which I'm experiencing. So experiencing mourning of a death of someone is still fleeting. So if it's fleeting, I want to immerse myself in it as best I can, just like a great actor does. A great actor, just when they go cut, they go off and they get the donuts or whatever it is as they go into the green room. Mm-hmm. And then action, they go right back into the role. So understanding that that's who we are. Don't get caught up in it. Just step away. You are the actor, not the role in which the actor is pursuing or the persona of the actor, of the part they're pursuing. You are that witnessing of that. And when you step away from that, life becomes so more...
It flows.
It flows. It becomes glorious. Even when these things that we consider to be bad happen. Someone dies. Yes, you mourn. But really... get into it. Like, wow, this is going to flee. Because anyone that knows that lost anybody, when they talk about the pain, they say over time, pain heals itself. It's over time, what happens is the perspective of your life continues changing. It doesn't mean you're not sad 30 years later. It's just that you don't sit there and harbor it. You don't think about it. It's just...
There's nothing wrong with feeling or emotion.
No.
That's important to growth. That's important to, learning and remembering, who you are.
Yeah.
And what this experience is. Yeah,
but like the emotion of anxieties, to me, when anxiety comes up, that's more of an alarm system. It means you're thinking of the future way too much. Depression is you're thinking of the past way too much. Mm-hmm. But these other emotions are supposed to be felt fully. Like there's nothing like this amazing. Like, and I imagine everyone listening here experiences sometime to where something hits you so beautifully to where you feel so good, euphoric, but you're crying. Tears are coming down your eyes. So those are brilliant, heightened emotions. But then you could look at someone crying and they have fear ripped in them. What's happening inside hurts. Just because someone died, crying is going to happen, but there could be this electromagnetic field running through your body as you're crying, but yet you're lightening yourself up. It could be the most amazing thing in the world. Doesn't mean you start laughing afterwards. You're really truly experiencing the feeling when you actually get into this place of surrender.
And there's some cool, there's some cool science behind that too. Like I've read and heard stuff about, how crying, allows our body to detoxify, and detox certain toxins and stuff like that. And so look at these feelings that come up and what happens with them. It's us clearing. It's us, clearing for the new. It's us recharging, refilling our cup. And that's what we need to celebrate, is that we have the ability to do this. Instead of pushing away these feelings of pain or sorrow or anything like that, let's sit with them. Let's learn from them. Let's grow with them. that's a much healthier way of moving forward, and you will thank yourself and feel better too.
Yeah. So that's like, obviously the surrendering part is like when you surrender, it's not giving up. It's quite the opposite. It actually brings you to the present moment. Because, you know, if say society's been around, or human consciousness, or, you know, humans been around for 60,000 years. So
wait, how long?
It depends who you talk to.
Uh-huh.
Say 30,000, 60,000. I'd say the Earth's been around here for 4 billion years.
Okay.
So right now, what's happening to me and Mike is a culmination of 40 billion years. So how the hell are we supposed to know how are we supposed to think about this?
Mm-hmm.
It just happened. How am I supposed to think about it? Yeah, there are certain tools that the mind uses, like learning the English language, learning how to count, know what right and left is, all these type of things that get me through the day. But when I'm talking, I'm not thinking, I'm just talking. And energy's coming through me, and I'm speaking away. I studied and read Michael Singer's books and stuff like that, and I listened to him. But I'm not thinking. I'm in this nice homeostasis place of information coming out. I didn't pre-talk about this, write it down. I'm not memorizing anything. And then I could feel it. And I also have known when I've done podcasts, when I start thinking, I get this weird feeling. And when I get that weird feeling, I got to drop it because this podcast is going to be horrible
exactly
if
what
I
you're
don't
talking
do
about.
that.
That's just you thinking. I know that feeling
Yeah,
too. Whenever I start to think when I'm
Yeah.
in this setting is when I'm like, oh, what do I need to say, or what should I bring up next? No, that's when you start tripping.
Yeah. You know, life is just spontaneously happening in front of you, and you've been here on this planet long enough to know that you can respond to it, not react.
And people, our audience at home, can relate to this. Think about
They
like when
better.
you're having a conversation or an awkward moment or stuff like that. It's because you're in your head too much.
Yeah.
You're wondering, how do I look? You know, are my clothes okay? Is this going to be a good time? You get caught up in the mind, and then that's when you're tripping all over yourself,
Yeah.
and you're oh, this is weird, and you're judging yourself, and you start feeling that weird pull. If you were to simply say, hey, I'm going to be so present in this moment, I'm going to let all of those feelings fall away, then you it's like stepping into a new you, and there's like this sense of calm, peace, confidence, knowing.
It becomes genuine is what
Yeah,
it does.
yeah.
It's genuine way of living is by surrendering to the moment which you're in. And like, to reiterate, Michael Singer ran a multi-billion-dollar company, so it's not like he was just off in the woods meditating and staring at birds.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he did that too, but
did.
he also, like, because people are worried that they're not going to be functional in society. I'm like,
Yeah.
you can be highly functional right
That
now.
was a
You're
concern
not
for me.
functional.
That was a big concern.
Yeah, like
concern for
actually,
me.
most people that think they're functional are actually making a muck of things, right? Like,
Yeah.
they're like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm like, maybe I should do a little less doing.
Those who are truly functional, quote unquote, functional in
Yeah.
life are the ones running this race so tired, wondering how they can get off.
Yeah,
I've
they're
been there,
banging
I
into
know.
every tree is what they're doing as they're running.
Yeah.
And the reason I could say this is I was once that individual that was doing that. I was tenacious. I had great willpower, and I'm like, what am I doing? And it was like, even if I got the outward result I wanted, I was too tired to even enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, there's got to be more to this. And then, books like Michael Singer's The Untethered Soul. It's like, wow, okay. And then it was cool to know, like, okay, this guy, from the outlook of human civilization, especially here in America, this man was highly successful
Yep.
in a business. So you don't have to negate that either. But that's not the goal. That's not the goal. He'll tell you, it's like, this book is not about becoming a billionaire. It's
No,
not
no.
about that at all. It's about surrendering and enjoying the life that's in front of you. I believe we are actors that came here. We signed a contract with a role to play, and we get the script. But how we read the script, how we act on the set with our other actors, that's up to us. There's nothing to think about. You just read the script, and you feel it. Okay, this feels good. Let me do this. The director will direct you. If you listen to the director, the movie turns out great. If you don't, director's cut. What seems to be the problem?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is, you become the director of the mind. And when the mind's not, when the mind's going off on a tangent, cut. Okay, what are we doing here? Let it rattle off, And then action, go back into using the mind for the purpose of which it was here, to function in the physical world, to recognize things, but not to think about them. You know, it doesn't know to think about it because it's never been here. It's only been yesterday or the moment before. How can it think?
I say we jump into a clip.
All right, here we go.
The only thing that keeps you from absolute freedom is yourself. So while you think that freedom means the freedom to get what you want, the freedom to do what you want, the freedom to be where you want, the financial freedom, etc., 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 you're still very lost, and you will never know freedom. And it's not the freedom to merge with God and to go deep into meditation. While that's what you're thinking, you're still thinking. It is when you become really, really clear, and it takes a real long time, and you just see, you know, this thinking stuff is way overrated. It's really not done me much good, and it's really not doing me much good. It's sort of like I'm working for my mind. My mind decides I'm not okay. And the moment it decides I'm not okay, guess what? I'm not. My mind decides this will make me okay, and guess what happens? The moment it decides this will make me okay, and that starts to happen, I am okay. It's like the mind's psychic or something. It just knows everything. That's what it would like you to think. But the truth of the matter is, this is the type of psychic that your mind is. I see water being dumped on your head as it picks up the water and dumps it on your head. I was right. No, that's not a psychic. That's not a psychic at all. Your mind is sitting there closing you because it doesn't like what's happening. And then it says, see, I told you you wouldn't like this. And your mind is sitting there opening so that you can feel the flow of the Shakti when it gets what it wants. And then the mind is saying, see, I told you that's what you wanted. That's what you come to know about the mind. It controls your state of being. So freedom cannot possibly be to get what the mind wants, because you are bound by the mind's wants and not wants. And freedom cannot possibly be, and this is a tough one for people, to be free to merge into God. Why? Why are you not free? You're not free because of your mind. So if you have a mind that's keeping you not free, and then the mind is saying, I know the answer, we need to learn to meditate. We need to merge into God. We need to go to India. You know you're in trouble when your mind starts telling you how to get to God. That is a sure sign that you are in deep trouble. But that's what the mind does. So a wise, mature being comes to see, I am the problem. There is no other problem. I am the only problem. My personal mind is the cause of every single problem I have. It's the cause of my problems in my personal life. It's the cause of every problem I have in this world with everybody and everything. And it is the reason that I cannot naturally merge with God. So the problem is me. Once you come to know this so deeply that all you ever want is freedom from yourself.
I like how he said that.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, I need to go to India. Yeah, it's true.
The mind tells us, I must do this in order to have this, and then I'll be happy.
Yeah.
Like, we've all lived through this. We all said, okay, I'm going to go to college. After I go to college, I'm going to get this job. And then I'm going to get the house. And then I'm going to have that partner. And then our kids. And then we get there, and we go, what the hell? Next up is midlife crisis.
And that's the reason we do that, because it temporarily distracts us. So if you feel like your life is out of control and you want to become spiritual, and here in the West, we think going to India is the best thing for spirituality because all the Eastern philosophies came out of there, and you go there, the traveling there will momentarily distract you because you're in the unknown, really, and all of a sudden you start feeling good. But what happens? You run into a guru, the guru starts telling you stuff that sounds like nonsense, and then the guru says, go home. Mm-hmm. And you're like, what happened? Because the guru knows that it doesn't matter where you are. We're on a round planet. You're focused on the outside world. India is outside of us. The state in which Michael's talking about is within. It doesn't matter where you are. You could be sitting on your couch. You could sit in an alleyway. It doesn't matter.
Sitting in your car on your way to work.
Wherever you are, wherever you go, there you are. Remember that statement that we heard? Doesn't matter wait. So you're going to take yourself, temporarily you're going to distract yourself because you're doing something new. And the mind's like, oh my God, we're doing something new. I don't even have to talk about it yet. So it keeps quiet. It's like, oh. Then all of a sudden it goes to India. Now it comes back and tells his friends how great India is and all this stuff. And
you guys have to go to India.
And then you're all like, shut the hell up, right? I don't even know what the hell I'm talking about. I have no idea what I'm talking about. And that's the mind. Mm-hmm. And Michael Singer brilliantly, he nails it.
One of my favorite lines out of this clip is he says, thinking is so overrated. Thinking is so overrated. And it's true. It is so true. And I was actually having this conversation with my brother, over this weekend. He was chatting with me, and he's, trying to buy this new laptop, and he really wants to buy this new MacBook and stuff. And it's driving him nuts because he's also saving for a house, and, he's got a couple things that he's working on. But he's like, he really wants this laptop, and I can just see it. Every time he's talking, he's creating, these different stories about what he'll do with it and how it's going to improve his business. And guys, we do this about everything. When we want something, we come up with all these, and what's going on is the ego is creating a certain narrative that allows us to feed into these wants, and then we get it, and it's great for, a week, 2 weeks, a month, and then we go back to that same feeling. And that's what he's talking about in this, is like, you can create this idea of what you want in your head, and as you're getting it, you can go, yeah, this is it, but really what you're doing is you're just aligning with your mind and creating peace with the story that you're playing in your head. And you can do that with any situation. So you could just as much say, oh, I don't need this type, or I don't need this stimulation, or I don't need this personal property, or whatever it is. I don't need this in order to find happiness. And then you're in an equilibrium with your thoughts. So it's learning how the mind works. And we're always going to set these little shiny goals, and then we work to achieve them. And as we're achieving them, it feels great. And during it, and when we achieve it, yes, I did it. I'm finally there. I'm finally happy. Wait, what happened? Yeah. I have the house. I've got the dog. I just had the child. It felt good for a little bit, because during that little bit of time, you were allowing yourself to feel good. You were allowing yourself to be at the baseline of the mind going, yep, this is what I wanted. And you can create that same baseline or that same effect in any given circumstance, simply by saying to myself, hey, look, life's unfolding. I'm so grateful. I'm so lucky to be in this moment. What this moment could lead me to, this unknown moment that could be the best moment of my life. The next 5 minutes could lead me to the best moment of my life, and we could live in that state.
But that means that is the best moment of your life before the next 5 minutes.
Yeah,
he's doing that, and that's what Mike isn't saying. I like the way he put this, but he's also not saying that, like, going back to his brother's story. If his brother didn't think about it, you're going to get, like, when you're in this state of surrender, you get these impulses, act on them. Buy the laptop. But if you think about buying the laptop and you create a narrative, a story, and then you buy the laptop, and a week later something doesn't fit the narrative, you have buyer's remorse.
Yeah, this happens to a lot of us.
Yeah, but do not create a narrative. Just get an impulse to buy it. Like, okay, like Michael Singer talks about that. He talking about computer. He walked into I believe it was like a Radio Shack, and saw a personal computer and just had an impulse to buy it. He didn't think about it. He just bought it. Mm-hmm. And when you look at his stories, like, that was the onset of him starting a software company. But he wasn't like a goal. I got to start a software company. Where do I go? Got to go to Radio Shack. No, he was just passing by Radio Shack. I'm like, oh, that looks really interesting. So when you're in the state of presence, of surrender, also get impulses, act on them, buy the house, get that car, get this, but stop putting a narrative to it. Because if you do, the house, the car, the outside world will turn in on you. It will. Because we said, okay, I got this, so it's gonna make my business better. And a year later, your business is better, so you're blaming the goddamn laptop.
Yeah, and we do this. We do this all the time
on the laptop. Because we
do that.
Yeah, because I even
comment. Yeah, why a lot of businesses fail.
And I even use, you understand when I'm talking here, and people have heard this, so I can't lie about it, the word preference and non-preference. When you get into surrender, you actually start to surrender even preference and not preference. Then everything becomes, quote unquote, preferential, because we don't know. Like, we're on this amazing ride. It doesn't mean we have control over the way we respond to it and interact with it. But also when you loosen up even your preferences, life becomes easier. I know, like when I got married, it's like, or before I was married, it was, with Karen for like 10 years probably to get married. But I don't I would have preferences, like strong preferences for no reason at all. And then we get into arguments like, okay, people do this. You're like, hey, where do you want to go for eat? I'm like, okay, I got to pick a preference so I win this battle. And then all of a sudden, let's go here, let's go there. No, let's go here. And all of a sudden, like, fine, we'll go where you want to go. Because I had to give my preference. And the truth is, I don't care. My body, wherever restaurant I go to, I can find something to eat. And if I go to a restaurant and they only have one little dish that's this big, my body's probably like, well, that's all you need tonight. and I remember when I first started doing that with Karen, he's like, do you not care? I'm like, oh, I love the experience of going out, but I don't have a heavy preference at all. All right. Now, if she didn't have a preference, I'd be like, okay, let's go here.
Yeah.
And like, why are we going there? I'm like, because it just chopped into my mind. Let's just go. I'm like, let's see what happens. And you end up having tremendous fun. But when I think about, if we go here, I remember last time I went there and it was, it might be crowded. It's too late. Oh, it's Friday night. Yeah. All of a sudden, let's just go make something.
Yeah.
Home.
Now we're going to grab Chipotle.
Now it's like I don't want to go to Chipotle. You think I wait in line.
But that right there, that is what happens to so many people. We do that all the time.
Yeah, you end up starving.
Yeah, we're like, oh, where do we want to eat all this? And we're thinking so much that finally it's 8:00 and we're like, screw it, I'm going to McDonald's.
Yeah. And there's another way of looking at it. Like when you get into that surrendered state, that really play state, you're guided down the river in which you jumped into. You purposely jumped into it. You'll play the role perfectly. And remember, we came here wanting this experience, and most of the time we're denying it. But like, you kind of asked for this. How we view it, how we look at it, can alter the way it looks. But the planet's the planet. You got 8 billion people on here. Everyone like, oh, life is great. I'm like, are you crazy? Have you been watching? Did you see that thing that guy said the other day? And I'm like, yeah, I think it's brilliant that anyone can speak their mind. But why are you getting upset at what that person said? Mm-hmm. Why are you allowing one person to take down you and a whole cultural people? Mm-hmm. That's ridiculous. When you do that, that's how the Hitlers are created. But when you don't listen to that nonsense and then go about your day, it's not sticking your head in the sand. You move towards the direction. It's when you get the fear. Because when you get scared, what happens is someone will come in and attract themselves to the fear, and they call them the dictator. Because no one could take over someone that isn't fearful. But people are like, I'm scared something's going to happen, so I got to do something. I'm like, well, you're in the state of fear. So these are physics problems. They're not psychological. Well, they turn into psychological problems. But if you look at physics, when you're scared, there's going to be a magnetism against it that's going to be the thing that you're going to be scared of. But when you're joyous, there's going to be magnetism to the thing that you're joyous to. It's a physics problem. And we turn into a social problem, and we do. And so people like try to argue about this, and they've done it before. I'm like, you're actually making my argument better, but you're just choosing the place that's what I consider non-preferential to you. But I'm like, you're actually making my point, because we get to choose that. When you surrender, you could see everything is equal. Then you give it light. Then you give it meaning from that place. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. But why would you choose something that was against you? And because this can happen. I'm like, that's your mind saying this can happen. It really is. The mind is a crazy lunatic up there.
It is.
Yeah.
Jump into the next clip.
There are many, many different ways to look at the mind. We're going to look at it in a very unique way this evening, but very, very helpful. Your body eats. You eat, you feed your body. Every one of you know that depending on what you feed it, it affects how it feels. You feed it junk, it feels junky. You feed it the right amount in balance, it feels good. Your mind is the same. Your mind is a thing. You're to see it as a thing. I wish you could just put it out here like a machine, like a computer. If you feed your mind junk, it spits out junk. If you feed it healthy, positive things, nice things, it spits out nice things. It's just a thing. We're just too close to our minds, so we don't see it as a thing. We make a gross mistake. Somehow we see our minds as us. Your mind is not you. You are the one who has a mind. You are the one who can make the mind do what you want. Make it say hello, it'll say hello. Make it say goodbye, it'll say goodbye. The minute you tell it to, right or wrong. Make it say hello right now, over and over again inside. Saying it in it. You can create thoughts. Your mind creates thoughts. That's what a mind is. We know what a body is. What is a mind? It is a thing in the universe that creates thoughts. It's a thought-creating machine. You need to understand this, just like you understand your body reasonably, how to feed it, what happens, and so on. You need to understand how you use your mind, just like how you use your body. But we're not taught this, and we don't deal with this. So your mind is an instrument, an appliance. I like it to be an appliance. My mind's an appliance, like a blender or something, except it's a thought-creating appliance. If I tell it to, if I use my will, I can make it do whatever I want. Period. I can make it visualize what I want. I can make it say what I want, at least for a moment. And so can you. Every single person, if I tell them, tell their mind to say hello inside, their mind is going to say hello. It may not last very long. It may get distracted by something, but you have the ability to make your mind create the thought that you want.
Yeah, I like how he said that, how the mind is an instrument.
Well, it's so,
an appliance.
So well said, because we're all walking around identifying with our minds and saying, oh, this is who I am. I'm an introvert. Because in my head, I say I don't want to go outside, and go to the movie theater or go to a bar or go to a club. Yeah. So I'm an introvert. So now I'm going to associate, or my mind, I'm going to associate only with introvert thoughts. Anything that's not an introverted thought, that's not me.
Yeah.
That's such bullshit, guys. Well, you see what I'm saying? Like
yeah.
we put ourselves in these tiny little boxes. We are telling ourselves what we are and what we're not based on our thoughts. And as Frank and I discussed earlier in this episode, you are a host. So half of the thoughts that are even coming in, they didn't come from you, from your higher self. No, these were thoughts out in the ether that, popped into your head. And you had the choice, the ability to attach to them or to not attach to them. And so you're attaching to these thoughts and saying, this is who I am.
Yeah.
And you can easily do that with a whole new set or series of thoughts.
Yeah, or look at the fractal understanding of it. Like when people identify, so if you look at your higher self as looking at your body, and your body's just another instrument. It's like your body now looking at a cell phone. Look at how many people are getting trapped into their identification of cell phone. They put the certain color screen on it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But they're completely identify with it, and when they lose it, they lose their mind. Mm-hmm. I'm like, but know this: when you look at it as a piece of technology and use it as such, it's a brilliant tool. Okay, I put the apps in which I'm going to use on. No one does it for me. All right, so I'm choosing that. So I put in my mind what I want to program as far as habitual aspects. I learn the English language. If I need to learn another language, I use the mind to do that. And in the moment in which I need the language, I pop it up. I don't sit there and think about it. I don't have to learn English language every day, even though I probably should work on it.
We all should.
Yeah, we should. But so I keep and in the practice of me doing the programming, I'm present in that. I'm not thinking about it. I'm just adding to it. But I only draw from that in the moment in which I need it. Like I don't walk around, like police officers don't walk around with their guns in their hands. They draw them in the moment in which they need it. All right? That is how we use the efficiency of it. But we don't just blur it out and have the mind keep going and going and going and going. Like when you're not using your cell phone, you don't necessarily turn it off, but you tune it down. In other words, I have all the apps not running, so it saves energy. But if I had everything open, all of a sudden, like, why is my battery on my phone dying by noon? So you have all these apps open.
And that's
show down.
Why our energy levels die by...
It keeps going.
Yeah. Well, we think about, like, you can have a great night rest. You can get 8, 9, even 10 hours of sleep. And then you can wake up the next morning and still feel tired. And that has nothing to do with the amount of hours you slept or your rest or, if you're waking up at night or not. No. You have depleted your energy from you overusing the mind.
Yeah.
That's what it's too much thinking. You are thinking too much and you are depleting the energy that you have. And you need to go in and you take count of this, take stock of it, take inventory of this energy. And so when something comes up in the news or something like that, and it's the story of the day or a story of the week, you can allow that to take your energy, and to begin to deplete your energy. And trust me, this is what the media wants, because they're, 2 minutes later when they get to the commercial break, they've got the product
then
that's
they're selling Red Bull.
they're gonna sell you,
help you out.
That's gonna pick you back up or give you what you were looking
Yeah.
for or save you. So keep this in mind. When you wake up, you start to see, oh my gosh, I'm personally giving my energy away to all of these different things that I don't need to.
Essentially, you're the one creating the very problem which you think you have.
Yeah, and Michael said this in the last clip.
Yeah.
You are the problem.
Yeah, you are.
Until you can have the maturity and that level of awareness to know that you are responsible for everything that's going on in your world right now, you have not woken up to this dream. You're still very much so caught in the cycle. If you're pointing your finger right now and saying, if only I had different parents, or if only I was brought up in a different culture, or if only I was done this.
And you're pretty much screwed if you're saying that.
Well, you know what I mean?
Can't
But
go
it's
back
always somebody outside
Yeah.
of you's fault. If you're not taking responsibility for everything in your life, and guys, this was the big moment for me, because it was always somebody else's fault.
Yeah.
Until I took responsibility for everything, that's when I woke up to this and went, oh my God, I've been running these bullshit narratives in my head my whole life. And I was living by these thoughts. This type of person acts this way. This is what women want. This is what men expect. This is what all these different things that have been force-fed to me my whole life that I thought was me, because my thoughts were that. No, I realize I'm not my thoughts. In fact, I get to choose the thoughts, and I can let go of any thought at any moment. That's when things change for me.
Yeah, if you act it out, you feel like you're your thought. But yeah, like I run into this. I've done this to myself. Someone actually many years ago did this to me, and it woke me up. And I do this now for my clients when they're like not feeling good. I'm like, just do me a favor. Close your eyes, okay? And I walk them through a breathing technique, and I do that. And afterwards, right when they open up, how do you feel? Like, I feel better. I'm like, you just did that. So don't tell me you're not in control. It's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you just you just stopped your way of thinking by looking at your breath. Because if I'm looking at my breath, I can't give the mind any. Yeah, I can't think. I'm not giving the mind any attention to its thinking. But so the fact that I had the capacity to do that, I don't need to close my eyes in order to do this. I actually have control. And what do they do is I ask them to let go of what they're thinking about right now, close their eyes, and take deep breaths. And so what they did is they surrendered in that moment, and they felt good until the mind revved up again. But I'm like, well, who's allowing that to happen? It's not happening to you. You're allowing it.
You're happening to yourself.
So every time when it was done to me, I was like, wow, my higher self does have control. I'm like, yeah, it does. But the control is letting go, not strangling it. Not, if you have noise in your head, blasting music isn't going to help. It doesn't drown it
call
out.
it letting go or call it accepting it. They're both the same.
Yeah.
You're letting go of the hold, meaning whatever the feeling that you have from it, you can let your shoulders down. You can untighten your jaw. You can focus on that in-breath. You can feel the out-breath.
Yeah.
And then everything really, it's not as tight.
And and when you actually get in that state, whatever task you had to do, all of a sudden your machine. Because if I had to make a phone call, and if I have 1% on my phone, good luck with that call, unless it's a quick one. So I want my phone to always be at a high charge, so I don't have to worry about plugging in or running to power it up. So I take care of it. And if you take care of yourself, whatever situation, circumstance you're in, you'll actually respond to it brilliantly. Preparing life is getting into the state, not trying to reorder or reorganize the outside world. You won't reorganize the outside world. You just put another ripple in the very water which you're trying to make smooth. I'm like, it's ridiculous. Trying to stop a wave just makes another wave. It doesn't make the water. Just sit back and let it go. Let it unfold and see what happens. You start to see the lake start to simmer. All right?
I love that.
Yeah.
Let's dive into this next clip that you got.
Give me a list of what interests you most in this world. And you do the list, and I create a hologram like you've never seen. And I set up a room that when you walk in, that's what's there. Wherever you turn, all the things you said that interest you, you're not leaving the room. There's nothing there. It's a hologram. It doesn't matter. Since that's what interests you, and I made it very easy for you to project outside by giving you the stimuli, then what you're going to have going on inside of you is what interests you. Therefore, you won't leave the room. So you are affirming the falseness, and that's Maya. That's how you stay caught. What has happened is everything is here, nothing is here. So it's called the everything and the nothing. What is the lake? Nothing. Everything. Whatever you reflect in it, it is. Don't reflect anything, it's nothing. You bring into this world what is inside of you. And it reflects you really well, doesn't it? If you think somebody loves you, gee, they act like they do, don't they? If you think somebody doesn't love you, then they don't. Those little things you look for that prove that they do, they're never there, are they? They don't open the door anymore, and they don't ask this, and they don't do that, and they don't say the I love you at exactly the right tone, and you never close your eyes anymore when I kiss you. You're doing it. As long as you have something inside of you that wants or doesn't want, that has personal, the world is such a perfect reflector of your personal that that's what you will see. And since that's what you see, by definition, that's what you're interested in. Therefore, by definition, you will not go to God. You will stay in the room where you got put, where you're seeing that which interests you. The only difference between that and getting out is you, is letting go of relating to things in a personal way. So real spirituality, in the beginning and the end, is always that. There is no other teachings, period. There is nothing else. You have to die to be reborn. It's that simple. You must be willing to let go of your personal self in order to merge with the universal self.
I love that point. So that's what I was thinking about. So if you have a preference, where did it come from? Because it came from when you didn't have a non-preference and experienced something. Right? The first time a kid climbed a tree, they didn't have a preference to climb a tree. All of a sudden they climbed a tree and they felt good. All of a sudden now they have a preference to climb a tree, and they're always looking for that same feeling from the tree, and they're never going to get it. So when you let go, because that's what it is we're like, oh my God, I went to this restaurant, had a great time. I'm like, you went to that restaurant for the first time, had a great time because you didn't have any preference about that restaurant. It was so much else going on that you would detach from it. Now when you go to the restaurant the second, third time, the waiter didn't look at me the same way they looked at me last time. You stop picking up on these weird things.
Well, they're made up.
Yeah, they are. But they're made up because of the previous time where you didn't necessarily have the preference.
And that's you comparing this time from last time. That's what the mind does.
You can't do that.
We compare, we measure, we judge.
Yeah. And when you slow down the act of comparison, you have a brilliant life. Yes, there's a storm, there's a hurricane, a tornado. So what? It comes, it goes. And you live a brilliant life. Like, just try this. Like, there are people that, like, I've read stories about people in prison. They're in prison and they realize they're not getting out, and they surrender, and they have these brilliant moments that they talk about. I'm like, how can someone have a brilliant moment in prison? Well,
it's happening all over the place.
Yeah, if you read
Nelson Mandela.
Yeah, well, yes. Thank you. Great book. I mean, he wrote about that. Also to Viktor Frankl. He was in Auschwitz. It's one of the books that came out of that time during the Nazi regime, where when you're looking, a man's search for meaning, I was like, how did this guy find love in that place when he was being tortured the way he was? Because he detached from it.
That's it.
And I'm like, wow. I'm like, if that guy could find love and in that,
But
how can I not at
see-
a restaurant that I don't like?
See how what the grip of the mind that has on us? Like Frank and we can all agree, like, oh, how could you really find like true love, peace, joy when you're in prison? And we're kind of like, oh yeah, that's probably just a degree of love or a degree of, but it's not true. It's not full. And I'm telling you right now, these are some of the most impactful moments of these two gentlemen that we just brought up's lives, where they wouldn't trade that for anything because of the amount of love that they felt in those situations and like true meaning and purpose, etc. We're so quick to judge a situation and say, oh, that's not how I pictured it in my head, so there's no way it could give me that sense of fulfillment. And we don't know that. We don't know that until we completely surrender. Like, I don't know how to explain this, but I mean, like, I have felt it many times in my life in situations where I'm like, never would this, I think this situation or this series of events could give me that sense of fulfillment and love that I'm experiencing. But after experiencing that, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah. And we are tenacious beings, that's why. But like when you look at the two gentlemen, Viktor Frankl and Nelson Mandela, especially Nelson Mandela in the beginning, he was very angry. But then he realized this anger is going to kill me. And when he surrendered to love, his stay in prison became a lot different, tremendously a lot different. And so, okay, yeah, when you're up against the wall, you leave with less choices. Out in this world, we're told we have all these choices.
We're in a prison.
Yeah. Well,
it's a mental prison.
Yeah, it is a mental prison. But when we actually, okay, I'm going to choose this. Oh, that didn't work. Let's choose this. Okay, how many different flavor bagels you have to eat before you realize you don't really like bagels? Or maybe you do like bagels, but you're trying to find the best bagel. I'm like, the best bagel is the one you're eating at the moment in which you're in.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
Who's to say that the guy in the prison, he doesn't have to wake up and think about making any food. He doesn't have to wake up, think about buying any food. No. I mean, he's
got to worry about getting shanked.
He's quite seriously. He's quite free. Where we've been taught that we're given freedoms, right? We live in this freedom world.
That's more of a certainty, not a freedom.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Yeah. You know what I mean. Yeah. But at the end of the day, like these freedoms that we're talking about, like how free are you if you're a slave to that 9 to 5? And if you don't go to that 9 to 5 for 2 weeks, you can't afford to pay that electrical bill or that mortgage that that keeps shelter for your family and keeps heat on or cold air on. Okay, so now
we live in Arizona. It's cold air.
Yeah, we need cold air.
You don't like if people. I can't keep the heat on. As most people in the world, like,
and we're all like,
"Hey, in Arizona, like, just keeping the heat on. Cold on. Are you kidding me?
Seriously,
we don't need heat here."
But it's we're not as free as this media likes to paint.
Well,
that we are. No, we're very much slaves to this economic system. And as soon as we wake up to that, that's when we start letting go of all these misconceptions and all these narratives. And no longer are we slaves to the mind. We are now taking back our power, taking back our true freedom. And so like this clip right here I love because it's called Look into the Lake of Life. So we have this screen, this field, this experience that we're calling reality. Call it God, call it reality, call it whatever, the ether. But we're experiencing this lake of life. And this lake shows us a reflection depending on what our consciousness is focused on. Where we put attention is when we make wave form into particle. It goes from wave to particle through the observation. This is what the double slit experiment has shown us. This is what physics has proven. So we are able to make something real simply with our thought alone.
And observation.
Yeah, good point. With observation. So we can look into this screen and observe for anything we want. We can observe for love or we can observe for hate, and we will find both.
Well,
that's how this lake of life works.
You could just be like, interesting. There's another.
That's allowing it to unfold.
And yeah, it does.
know?
Yeah. Let's check out the next.
I thought that was a good clip.
That was a great clip, man.
Spirituality and the spiritual path is way more simple than people make it. In fact, it's the most simple thing that you can do with your life. Everything else is just complicating the issue. What you will see eventually, and it's true of everybody all the time, is if you will look clearly inside yourself, what you will see is that you want to be okay. That's what you want. It's so simple to say it that way. I want to be okay. What does that mean? I want to be okay. I want to feel right inside. I want to feel love. I want to feel joy. I want to feel enthusiasm. I want to feel strength. I want to feel well-being. That is so innate. It's just like your body wants to feel well. Nobody wants to have aches and pains and be sick and things with their body. They want to feel invigorated. They want to feel strong. They want to feel right. It's exactly the same, except actually stronger with your psychological being, with your spiritual being. You want to feel high. You want to feel well. You want to feel right. That is so obvious and it is so simple, but nobody will see that. Nobody will own that. They own all these other things that they want. I want to get married. I want to have a car. I want people to respect me. I want to look better. I want, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's just millions and billions of things that they say they want. And they also have all these things that they say they don't want. Eventually you go very quickly and you see that wants and don't wants are the same. They're just like light and dark are the same. They're just variances in the spectrum of light. You stretch out the wavelength of light, colors change. If you want, you can get all hung up on the colors, or you can say, this is the light spectrum. So there is this spectrum of feelings, of states of being that you can have inside. They can go from very dark to very light. You don't like the dark, and you like the light. That's very easy. So liking and disliking are just different degrees of wanting to be okay. Eventually you just see it all as the same.
I like the way you said that.
Me too.
Because we talked about that too. Like a lot of times people talk in the world of duality that there are opposites, and there really aren't any opposites, but just in different degrees of the same thing.
And we talked about that there's only love, and everything is on that spectrum of love.
Yeah, so love will be the whole understanding of the energy that's out there. So love is all energy flowing through us with any resistance based on where we're at. But yet fear and courage are the same. It's just a different degree. Just like I used this before, temperature 80 degrees and 20 degrees aren't opposites. They're just different degrees of temperature. So there is no absolute darkness. There's no absolute light, so to speak. Or everything comes from light. It's just different degrees of light create what we think is darkness. Same thing with love. And we start to understand the physics behind that. You just let go and it's like, okay, this thing's happening. So what? It's me saying it shouldn't have happened that's creating the turmoil, not the actual thing that's happening. And it's a very simple concept, but we have to let go inside and ask the question, why is this upsetting me? And you'll be because this is what happened, this shouldn't happen, so on and so forth. And then when you're done with that answer, say, okay, why does that bother you? Well, because when Mary looked at me and it made me sad. Why is Mary looking at you this way make you sad? Because in the third grade, well, why in the third grade? And you get to a point where you have no answer. Because it somewhere was made up and you attached to it. And instead of letting it go, we grabbed onto it and created a pattern inside our body. So next time something like that happens, it hits us. You know, one in his book, I'm trying to think, it was The Untethered Soul, I believe. He uses an example, which I thought was brilliantly, about a thorn.
Okay.
So he says, imagine life like you got a thorn in your side, and say on the side of your back or whatever, and you, instead of pulling it out, you just keep it there, and over time you get used to it. But then you rub up against something that sticks you, all right? And like, oh, every time I lay on my side, it sticks me. So then you create some apparatus. So now you put this apparatus around your body, but now you find out you can only sleep sitting up because you have to have this apparatus. So as time goes on, instead of pulling the thorn out, you're actually working around the thorn. Now you're no longer sleeping on your back. You're sitting up sleeping. You can't go on a date with someone if you're then. You have to make sure they're lefty because the thorn's on my right-hand side, and they have to stay here. So all of a sudden you're creating this world around this thorn. If you just pulled out, you would need an apparatus and the pain would go away. But instead of pulling out, we just bury it by putting apparatuses around us, creating the world, do this, do that. Next thing you know, you're like, you know what, I'm not leaving the house because I have this thorn.
That's a great example.
And he explains it brilliantly. I chopped it up there for time purposes, but
that's what we're doing.
That's all we're doing. It's a thorn. Pull it out. Get rid of it.
So the thorn's the mind, the thinking mind. And we're all dancing around this thinking mind, saying, all right, in order to, I'm going to feel better if I just go and get that workout machine. I can't tell you guys how many times my family bought workout machines growing up that they didn't fucking use. Like, I think everybody had a NordiTrack in their house that never got used. But like, we have these ideas of things that are going to, work for us and do this, and the mind is that thorn. And until we let go of that thorn, until we take that thorn out of the situation, we're going to constantly be tiptoeing around the mind.
That's what you're tiptoeing around, that thorn. And that's we all essentially know that's not the way to live, but we actually think we don't have the capacity or the ability to pull the thorn, and that's not true. When you just sit with yourself and let go of any feeling, I don't care how miserable you are. You don't remain miserable forever. You don't. And actually, the first sign of misery, then you get through the day, and then it comes up again. The time spans short. They shorten how long you're miserable for. But what happens is they replicate more often. So the time of what we consider to be peaceful is shorter. And the misery. But you wouldn't know you were miserable unless you had onsights of freedom. And typically what the freedom part is disappearing. Like when we were children, we didn't know enough to think about too many things. We just did it. So it's that child mind, the childlike state that Jesus talked about getting back into. And we can do that by surrendering and letting go. You know nothing. Just like when I was 9, I knew very little. But it didn't matter if I went to the woods, went to the playground, or we're just sitting on the curb with my friends. I had the most magnificent time. I didn't judge it based on what did we do. Like everyone's like, oh, we were always out doing stuff. Half the time we were just sitting leaning on a tree. Mm-hmm. We really were. It wasn't like we were physically active. I'm like, when I really think, and again, my memory isn't great, but I remember most of the time just sitting, leaning against a tree, or sitting on a fence post, or sitting on a curb, and just being in the moment. Whatever came out of my mouth came out of my mouth, kind of like right now in this podcast.
Sorry, Karen.
I'm sitting on a fence. Yes, sorry, Karen, exactly.
Whatever comes out, comes out.
Yeah, she knows that. That's why she married me. I don't know if that's why she married me, but there's something nice about it. There's something genuine about it, but I really don't know. I don't know. And the more
the problem is we all think we do know.
Yeah, I used to think I knew, and now I realize I don't. I don't know.
But ask yourself, take stock of this at home. Say, like, do I already say to myself, oh, I know what this weekend's going to bring. I already know what this afternoon at work's like. I already know what I'm going to feel like. I already know what lunch is going to taste like. We say this a lot, and we're already judging every situation, saying, I know how I'm going to feel after going to work and after a long week. Oh, I know I'm going to be exhausted this weekend. Yeah. Do you know? Or are you looking into the lake of life and telling yourself what you want to see reflected? Because unconsciously, that's what you're doing. You're looking into the lake of life and saying, I know I'm going to be tired 4 days or whatever, times 24 hours, whatever number of hours is, I'm going to be that. And you're going to find that, and you're going to see that, because that's how the lake of life works. That's how this reflection works.
Yeah, it's true. And what I do know is when I stop knowing, I actually end up knowing more. It's a paradox, but it really
Absolutely.
is. So the world we live in this different way of looking at it, of surrender, is it's this and that, not or. So dark or light, what would you rather be in? Well, it's dark and light. Like, well, what do you mean? Well, due to contrast, in certain situations. But I'm like, in certain situations, the situations occur. I'm just okay with it. I'm fine with it. You know, at least most of the time. I get caught up in it once in a while. I hear my mind racing, but I have techniques now just to kind of like, oh, that's just.
When the mind's racing, it's like being in second gear.
And never, yeah. So how fast can you go in second gear without revving up the engine? Maybe like 30 miles an hour.
Sure.
You know, so you'll be 30. That's the thought. Now your life is stuck at 30 miles an hour. Meanwhile, you have 6 gears in your car and you can't get past second because you know you're going to blow the engine, so you just travel at 30 miles an hour.
And that's where 95% of the world's at. I'm just going to go to my 9 to 5. I'm not going to cause trouble. I'm not going to, I'm going to slowly creep through life because this is how I was told and taught.
Yeah.
This is the right way. Yeah. This is what society shows me every day on the news. This is where I'm supposed to be. And I'm being a good little consumer in this spinning wheel.
Yeah. And that's just so, like, go to your job, watch the news, but detach from it, and if, after a while, like, watching news becomes seemingly
laughable.
Well, it does. I don't necessarily laugh at it, but it's not something I need. Like, what's in front of me right now is all I need.
Well, you start to see through it.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
Like I can't
now
turn on the news.
The narrative of the news now is how should I think about that thing?
Exactly.
And I'm like, I'll think about it any way I want. And all the information I need to get comes up somehow if I do need it. If it's not in front of me now, it means I don't need it right now.
And it's weird. We've even developed a new name for this. I forgot what it was, but they call it it's opinion news or something. These Foxes and these CNNs, they're opinion news anchors is what they're calling them because they only are phrasing it from one side. And so rather than saying, hey, we're not news and this is a bullshit narrative that I'm feeding you, I'm going to call it opinion news.
Yeah, and people watch.
What?
Yeah, people watch the news thinking they need to be informed, but that would be just like walking around with your refrigerator on your back because you're gonna be hungry later. I'm like,
that's a good example.
You don't need to carry it with you. I'm like, there's places when you're hungry, you find the place in which you go, and in that moment, it satisfies that moment. But I don't carry it around with me every moment.
I'm glad you bring that up because that's one of the biggest things that people say. Oh, I got to be informed. I'm an informed citizen. You don't want to be informed? Get out of here, man.
Informed about what?
Yeah, you're holding yourself to this very weird self-identity, this very weird identity that you've created and cultivated.
Fight for.
And you're fighting for it.
And the problem is what happens if you have an identity and someone comes out there and says something against your identity, it puts you up in arms. And now this person you were whistling down the street, walking the dog, and everything's fine. And all of a sudden, did you hear what so-and-so said? And now the world's up in, oh, my God. One person said something, and everyone's up in arms. I can't believe that. And I'm like, one person's word took down a whole community. I'm like, wow. I'm like, maybe we should rethink about who takes us down. Mm-hmm. Again, I respond to those things as well. But when it dings me, I'm like, oh, shit, boom, pull the thorn out. Don't need it no more. So it's not that you're going to get not snagged, but now I no longer create an apparatus around my thorn. I just pull the damn thing out. And, it hurts for a second, but, it's a lot worse hurtful to my life if I put an apparatus around it and I can't do much. Mm-hmm. I might as well just stay at home. There's apparatus, I can't drive my car with it. There's all these things, and this is where these neuroses come from. Mm-hmm. Neuroses are just they keep cutting down their life based on what they have. I can't drive because I have this thing
and
going
this is
on.
the majority of where sickness stems from.
Yeah, we all have it. Actually, because all of when you look at the world, everyone's neurotic. But if my neuroses isn't as much as the person next to me, I seem to be normal. So it's a comparative aspect because mental illness is a comparative aspect. If this person can conduct themselves around other people, they're not mentally ill. But if they start acting out, they're mentally ill. I'm like, so it's based on comparison, not actual, are they mentally ill? Because there are people who have been accused of mentally ill because the main senses of people acted this way. And then one day, people that was the most sane person in the whole community. It's his name was Jesus or Moses or, Muhammad. all of a sudden it's like, wow, like people weren't, they didn't click onto it, and all of a sudden there was something wrong with them. We have to get rid of them, and all of a sudden you realize, be careful.
Wow,
Wow, yeah.
My whole life I've been running with the crowd saying this is normal.
The mob
and
mentality.
and then this weird Jesus guy comes around speaking the complete opposite of what I'm saying and what I've been told, and we burn him at the stake. And then we find out, come to find out, everything this gentleman was discussing was the truth to our freedom.
Yeah, and again, get back to the principle too, because he would have said this too.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah, you don't praise the person; you praise the information which the person's revealing, and that's the sanctity of all this thing. Like a Michael Singer is presenting information. He himself doesn't want to be praised. No one wants to be praised. It's kind of aggravating, right? If you're praised, all of a sudden you're
it's because that's the identity. That's not you.
No. But the information's true. What I do with the information, what Mike does with the information, and what Michael Singer does with the information is differently. But when we surrender, we have this sense of freedom experience. And all of a sudden life becomes joyous regardless of what's going on.
See, Jesus could come down right now and begin to
he
share
would be on a
this
podcast?
information. Yeah, hell yeah, he would sit right here, and he
hell
would be
yeah.
really excited too.
Yeah.
He'd be like, guys, I was looking forward to
If
this.
Jesus was here right now, what would you ask him?
Oh man, I would actually ask a bunch of stuff.
How is Joseph as a stepdad?
yeah, right. But if Jesus were to come down right now and start saying, guys, whoa, what's going on? I never told anybody that they couldn't be gay. I never told anybody this. Why are my words being twisted on me? We would have people in different factions around this planet and Earth going, he's wrong. That's not the real Jesus. Kill him. We would crucify the poor man again.
Well, yeah.
And it's because anything that goes against the mob mentality we have been taught is wrong.
Yeah.
And so until we realize we have to go against, we have to turn away from what we've been told and conditioned and beaten into our whole lives to find true salvation.
But we don't have to go against it. We just have to let go of it.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. You don't want to go against anything. You go against, you're going to attract more of.
Exactly. You're just going to be on the other side. You know, like a fascist. There's people like that. Like they have this Antifa group came out. I don't know if they're still around, but they're called the anti-fascist group. And then when you see how they were acting, they actually
total fascists.
They became fascists. I'm like, what's the definition? So if you just dropped it and let go of it, you would just be in this nice neutral place where you actually then can actually help society. You can actually help people overcome things because people are going to act poorly, but then when they overcome that, their poor act will teach them how to act, and it's usually because they're trying to hold on to something that someone told them to defend. You know, the largest army it becomes the moral standpoint of society. It has because it had more people to it. That's what made the moral compass.
Well, think about where us as Americans, we went over into other parts of this world. We've done this our whole existence, and we've told people, you're not behaving the way you should. You must behave like we do.
And we actually created America because we didn't like that being told when we were in England.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at the people came over in the early 1600s, the Pilgrims, they came over because they didn't like the tyranny of the way it was run by religion. So they were like, I'm out of here. And then, but it's a human psyche, so we can't blame particular humans because everyone's done this. It's in the human psyche. But when we surrender to it, that's why we always get really weird when we create groups and peoples and religions and colors and that. I'm like, every human being, man and women, I'm like, we all have the same attributes. Every human being could surrender and everyone could grab arms against something. I'm like, it doesn't matter what color you are, or what race you are, or what gender you are. When you do that, it creates a fight. Now, what happens is if there's more people on my side, it makes me feel good momentarily. But I'm like, really? Because after every war broke out and every war ended, the people that were warring ended up fighting somewhere. Or the soldiers then learned to find peace within the state of peace. They had to do that, or else they would just fight amongst themselves. And this keeps replicating. But wow, like, how do I come to peace? I'm like, well, that's an inward game. You know, again, if I'm not against or for anything, I'm not going to criticize that person's journey either, because then I'm against or for it. So if I'm listening to something, I'm like, oh, that person messed up. I'm like, well, I'm for something. But when I actually do that, I'm like, it's interesting. It doesn't mean you don't and then I live my life this way, incongruent with the society in which I'm in. There's a way to do that without actually being for or against something, or I'm for peace. But peace doesn't mean that person over there did it wrong. I don't know. I really don't know. But I know the feeling in my body. No one could tell me that is wrong. I like this feeling. And there were times when I thought I was right. Intellectually, everyone thought I was right, and they listened to me, but it felt bad inside me. Because I know it was only a half-truth, that I was trying to diminish somebody else's truth with it, and I had the ability intellectually and argumentatively to explain that. But I didn't like the way it felt. I'm like, I didn't like that. And turns out if you put me on the other side long enough, I would come up with a greater argument. And I realized, okay, this is a crazy game we're playing. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In that game, we call it life. We call it reality.
Yeah, we call it reality.
One of my favorite things, guys, about Michael Singer is his story of the surrender experiment. And if there's something we can leave you with after this episode, it is the overarching, idea of surrender. And that's not giving in and allowing bad things to happen or allowing things that you normally wouldn't slide or anything like that. It's just accepting the situation for exactly what it is. And not trying to change it, not trying to create a mental narrative about why this ought to be a different way or how this could be better or, what needs to come next, but just simply being in that moment and surrendering to whatever's going on.
And that's how
do that.
And that's how we truly change the world.
Yeah.
We truly change the world by choosing that. Because, if a car's coming at you, get the hell out of the way.
Exactly.
But once the car passes you, you don't have to walk around thinking you almost were killed.
Mm-hmm.
Because that doesn't serve you any purpose. And so it's not, you don't become just completely sticking your head in the sand. You don't become like a doormat. No, the opposite, actually. You become more responsive. And in that state of responsive, you'll know how to handle any problem that's in front of you. Because there are problems out there. I'm not denying there's problems. But by throwing a rock at someone who threw a rock at me isn't going to solve the problem. Because eventually they're going to come back with 2 more of their buddies and throw 3 rocks at me. And I'm like, at one point do we end up throwing rocks? How do I deal with it? Like, okay, why don't I become their friend? Then we don't have to throw rocks at each other. We can build a house with those rocks.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is nice. Let's take these rocks that we used to throw at each other and build a house with it.
Be comfortable.
Yeah, brilliant. All right.
This was a great episode, guys. We appreciate you joining us for this week. Michael Singer has some content online. Frank, what was the thing you were sharing with me that you did? You purchased something of his?
Oh, yeah. He has a surrender experiment
Would you suggest
program.
people give that a try?
Yeah, it's like an 8-hour course. You go to michaelsinger.com. It's on his website. And it's a course. I've taken it. I'm actually halfway through it, doing it again because it's something,
You learn something every time you do it.
Oh, absolutely. And he walks you through it. Each episode, there's 8 of them. Each one is roughly an hour, so about 8 hours. I remember the first time I did it, I think I did it in a weekend. So, and I would sit down on my couch and listen to it, and he's got a little video watching it. But you let these ideas and concepts absorb into my head. Obviously, I had already read a couple of his books, but both of his books at the time,
Mm-hmm.
And I was familiar with this, but it just deepens every time because I still have thorns all over my body.
We all do.
Now I'm taking the apparatus off and I'm pulling the thorns out. Is really what I'm doing. So when something hits me, instead of because when something hits me, like we haven't mentioned this, but when something hits me, all of a sudden, like if someone criticizes me, my mind will like, hey, that person's a moron. Why do you care how they're criticizing you? That does not help people because that just puts another apparatus around. Because if I find somebody else that criticizes me that I believe is smarter than me, I am screwed.
Yep.
And I don't even know this person criticized me. All of a sudden I'm running in my head, they're an idiot, they're this, I'm like, I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
But yet I'm creating another apparatus by creating, my mind is working for me. Then my mind's going to turn on me and be like, well, maybe they are smarter than you. Like, shit. Like, oh my God.
The lake of life got me again.
Yeah, it got me again. So, I highly suggest checking out his program. He walks you through it. It's about an 8-hour course. You could do it one 1 hour a week. You can do whatever pace you want. I did it in a weekend, which I found really found exciting.
Good pace.
Good. Yeah.
Well, check that out, guys. Also, take a look at the two top bestsellers, Untethered Soul and then The Surrender Experiment. Those two books really help put him on the map with what, these consciousness topics that we're talking about. If you like what you heard, guys, please subscribe at the link below. If you have any questions, you can reach Frank and I at perspectiveshift2020@gmail.com. Other than that, we hope everyone has a great Halloween.
Yeah.
And we will see you guys next week for our follow-up episode.
All right. Peace out.
Thanks, guys.